Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Insider. Today, we are jumping into a lot more specifics on Title IX jurisdiction. Also, what does all inclusive bathrooms mean versus gender neutral bathrooms and when we divide bathrooms up? So, we're going to be looking at a lot of different topics regarding this, regarding how it affects students, employees, and the institutions themselves, especially when we see that the Trump administration is pushing agendas that are primarily focused on the sex assigned at birth to dictate what is really going on and what is being implemented at schools and on campuses around the country. And so today we get the opportunity to hear from one of my favorite people that I work with, which is attorney Lanie Bandell.
It's a pleasure to be here. And this is such an important topic that is, in real time being decided in many states. There's a lot of confusion. So it's a really important topic.
Awesome. Yeah, it is. And so we are going to be jumping in 1 minute, but I did want to say for those of you that are watching us, liking us, please subscribe to us. Please leave comments. We do want to respond to you all. If there's anything that you disagree with, let us know. We would love to hear that. And if you agree with us, also include that as well. And with that, Lainey, I will go ahead and just get us to jump in. Um, in particular, I think it'd be a good place to start off discussing what we are anticipating and awaiting from the Supreme Court, from the court systems themselves right now, especially when that is what's really determining a lot of what's going on around the country with Title IX. And we both know this really took place with the Biden administration, it took place with the Obama administration. Every single time there's a new administration, the pendulum swings, and it's always supported by what the court systems are saying and doing. So, Lainey, what kind of information would you like to share with us today about that?
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head about the pendulum swinging and the issue right now that many of the school systems and states are facing is that their inclusivity uh, policies and laws that were implemented under Obama and Biden are now shifting, whereas the Trump administration is trying to limit transgender being included in Title IX and the issues regarding which restroom a person who identifies as the opposite sex of what they were born into. So it's creating a lot of conflict and confusion because the states don't know what to do. For example, right now in Colorado and in Virginia, they have particular counties that are actually facing real-time Title IX issues. In particular, in Loudoun County, Virginia, Title IX complaint was filed by two males that filed a complaint for a transgender male utilizing their locker room. And the school system is like, listen, we're all about inclusivity. We allow gender identity to dictate which restroom or locker room somebody can go to and utilize. And what also is important is they do also offer gender neutral other alternatives. But the question is, do the two boys in the boys' locker room, are they able to file and succeed on a Title IX complaint against a student who was born female, but now identifies as male? And the school system is saying, well, according to Virginia Court of Appeals, yes, we can. We're going to abide by our inclusivity precedents, and we're going to wait for the Supreme Court. So, to answer your question, we're all now waiting on the Supreme Court to make the ultimate decision.
And you mentioned also in Denver as well. I know that in Denver, this more recently did happen. So they're being accused of having these multi-stall, all-gender restrooms. And I think the argument there is slightly different than what's going on in Loudoun County. And I think it's a very interesting, nuanced argument because in Denver, what's happening is it's not the all inclusive where you have someone of the opposite sex coming in because they're transgender trying to use the same bathroom. You actually have these multi-stall, all-gender restrooms where any sex, any person, any individual can use them, utilize them, go into the bathroom. And this is being, positioned as against Title IX. I'm not quite sure that's true. And I would have to side with the Denver school districts in saying that this is kind of weaponizing Title IX because of the fact that when you, in my view, I'm thinking about this as let's look at this everyday common sense. You go to a restaurant, you have an all inclusive restroom there.
Yeah.
You go to either bathroom, right? Many times it doesn't matter. Sometimes there's only one bathroom in a restaurant. So you're standing outside waiting to use it. It's not designated to one specific sex or gender. It's just a bathroom, just like in the bathrooms in your home. And and so then this is what the Denver School District did with their bathrooms. Not all of them. They still have male and female restrooms. But what they did do is they created a few restrooms that are standing on their own that can be for anyone. And so I find it a very interesting, nuanced bathroom argument from the OCR and the Trump administration, where they're kind of focusing here and saying that they're in violation. Any thoughts on that, Lanie?
Well, I mean, they're politicizing an issue, I think, just to try and drum up more support for their side. And especially in the case of Denver, I think there is a very strenuous nexus between Title IX and having these gender neutral bathrooms when the other options are still available. Just dummying it down, not from just from a human perspective, not from a legal analysis or Title IX analysis. You kind of want to say, who cares? If it bothers you to enter a bathroom where males or females can enter at the same time, go use the one designated to what makes you comfortable. My point is, you're given choices. So when you're given choices, I'm not sure how Title IX is going to ultimately apply, other than, like I said, it's politicizing and it's, kind of headlines for the, Trump administration and those that support restricting Title IX. It's just another, um, it's another issue for them to kind of push their agenda.
Right, yeah. And I find it just interesting because we have this really stark difference between the two types of violations where it's, there is this all-inclusive locker room concern where you have someone coming in that, I know in Loudoun County, apparently the individual that came in that is transgender was video recording the boys. Okay, so there is like this added layer of information of concern. Obviously, this is an area that, regardless if it was the same gender, it would still not be okay. If it was the same sex, it would still not be
Correct.
okay. So there are many things wrong with the situation that happened with Loudoun County. In Denver, when we look at these bathrooms, and I've been that individual to go on campuses, to walk through facilities, to walk through the bathrooms, and actually designate and state, can something be all inclusive? Can something not be? Should it not be? And I know that when I've done it in the past, obviously different administrations also existed at the time for several of these moments. But I would always make sure that there was a male and a female restroom. And if there was a standalone restroom versus requiring it being male or female, make that an all inclusive restroom for anyone. Because
Right.
otherwise,
Just like you see at the airport, you'll see a family restroom so that people can bring in, their stroller, and there's a diaper station. It's no different. Anybody can use the family restroom. A father can bring in the child, a mother can bring in the child. Um, it just, to me, that's very practical and almost obvious.
correct.
So I do think that that's why the Denver case is particularly interesting, and I'm not sure that it has many teeth.
Correct. Yep, I agree with that. Um, what are your thoughts on the fact that everyone is waiting for the Supreme Court to decide whether or not there is this safeguard within the jurisdictions of the states? I know so many of these states that do have the all-inclusive ruling still in place. They still have this protection to not have to follow Title IX federally from what the Trump administration is stating, but that could go away, and what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's like anything else. We waited and waited for the Biden administration to implement, the changes which came right at the end of his presidency, and then we had a shift. And I think, you know, nothing with the government happens quickly. I think everyone can agree on that. So, people are on standby, and that's what's very difficult and very um, stressful and draining on resources for individual institutions because they have to be ready to pivot at any moment. And so, I certainly wouldn't recommend ever anyone holding their breath for a decision, but we know it's coming. It's just a matter of when and how quickly institutions can respond. In light of that, certainly it's recommended to think ahead. Obviously, if they're already inclusive and they can maintain that status, great. But I do think institutions and Title IX offices need to be thinking ahead that what if, the Supreme Court rules in favor of, what Trump is seeking, and how are they going to, change things, and how are they going to handle it for those students that are affected? Because one thing that I think definitely gets lost, there are real students, real youngsters that are probably grappling with their own issues of sexuality and how to deal with being transgender at young ages. How is that going to look on a daily basis for that student? And making sure that that student has the appropriate resources no matter what the Supreme Court rules.
Right. And thinking about mental health as well. There's going to
Yeah,
be a lot of mental health needs going on, especially as we move forward. I'm sure the Trump administration is not going to stop here. And so there is going to be some big fights ahead, even if the Supreme Court allows for the federal government to be the primary head to make the decisions.
right.
I'm sure there will be so many appeals, so many arguments. Do we need to do this now? Can we wait for the appeal options from the Supreme Court? So there's going to be so many additional layers to this. Um, and over the last year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, I know that I've always released updated videos, especially when the courts were deciding these things, which are all up on YouTube and our different social media platforms that everyone can look up. But for right now, it's been interesting because I have not done those same types of videos because there's just so much information. There is a new school being charged with a violation every single week, almost on a daily
Yeah,
basis. You hear of a new school or campus. And is it always about the bathrooms? No. Is it always about sex and gender? Typically, yes, especially with Title IX. Um, and it's daunting, you know.
it is. And, there's been a huge, um, you know, there's been a lot of publicity regarding transgender athletes. Um, almost immediately upon Trump taking office, that was made a headline, and it's clearly on the agenda. But I do think that that's why Title IX Consulting Group is so important. Not only the messages, but because you are able to get feedback from schools across the country. It's so important that these institutions get ready to put the proper policies in place. And it's very daunting to do on their own, especially when, one county, neighboring them on each side is doing something different. It's going to be impossible to have complete consistency. But when you involve someone like yourself, Dr. Sandi, I think it definitely is critical to making sure that the schools are abiding by, the most recent updated decisions, laws, and policies.
Well, thank you, Lainey. I appreciate that, because our team is also composed of you yourself and so many other brilliant minds, which we're very grateful to have on the team. But you're right, it's all of these technical legal aspects that really pulls in not just federal, but the state level. the city level, the county level.
Mhm.
Then, sometimes we forget about just the institution, the school culture as well. These school cultures actually mean a great deal. And that pushback many times is because of the culture within that community that is driving this force against whatever they're fighting against or supporting that force of whatever they're supporting because it goes on both ends. There is an extreme push on both sides of this argument right now.
And there always will be. And, to me, what is very concerning is that the time, energy, and resources put into just figuring out which policy do we follow, which law do we follow, is being taken away from supportive measures for the students themselves, for implementing training for employees. I really have found that those aspects of Title IX are being somewhat neglected through no fault of the institution, but because of these ever-changing rules and the need to pivot.
hmm And I do have to say, I do agree with what the Loudoun County School Board decided because in just looking at, I printed it up and looking at their primary reasonings, their rationale,
Yeah,
they to the fact that they're following the controlling law, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, that has issued the binding precedent in Virginia that supports their current policies and practices. And secondly, what they included here, which I thought was even more important, is that OCR's interpretation of Title IX conflicts with existing law that applies to Loudoun County, changing their policy to align with non-binding
mhm,
federal guidance would not only be legally problematic, but could undermine clarity and stability for students, staff, and families. And I feel that that non-binding federal guidance is key because when
yeah,
we think about federal guidance, even under the Obama administration, that's what he had released was guidance. They were not regulations.
mhm,
You saw that across the country, people were implementing, when I say people, institutions were implementing Title IX very differently across the board. And
right.
then we were introduced to something called regulations by the Trump administration. And this was the game changer that required schools to all start having live hearings. And then everyone was doing that in higher education. K through 12 had the option to do it, typically not do it. And then we went back to another form of regulation very briefly with the Biden administration.
Right.
Here we are again with regulations. But everything that's coming out, the Loudoun County is correct. Everything that has come out regarding bathrooms, regarding this differentiation between the sexes, has been nothing within regulation. This is all guidance, and guidance does
Correct.
not have the power of law. And so this is where I do find Loudoun County is correct with their assessment and how they're handling it because of the fact it is guidance, it's not law. So they are right to wait to determine and decide what they do next. I know that when I've been on campuses to help support, even during the Trump administration, during his first go around of the administration, I recall being asked, should we change some of the bathrooms to be all inclusive and whatnot on a specific campus? I did my walkthrough. I was looking at the laws, state and federal. And what I decided then, this was prior to this current administration for Trump, I said, do not change anything. Do not change a thing. I said, leave everything as is. And it was interesting because they had an entire equity team, diversity
Yeah.
team that was
Hmm.
really pushing for we need to make the bathrooms all inclusive. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. We need to start the construction now. And here I was as a Title IX leader stating,
Saying don't.
do not do it. Do not
Yep.
do it. You need to wait because so much can happen. So much can happen within the law. So much can happen with the decisions that will be made that you are going to waste money, resources, and time where potentially you might have to revert everything back.
Yep. And that potentially could happen again.
Correct. And so I think, for this episode, let it be a warning for schools and campuses. Do not act too quickly on making the changes that you feel you are required to make right now until there is a definite decision made that legally binds you. Because otherwise, you may be regretting that decision down the line and wasting a lot of funding in doing
Yes.
changes without having something to really support that decision, simply because you believe you need to. That's not
Right.
enough.
I mean, it's important to be prepared for the if and when. Um, make mental notes, follow it. Um, you know, but as you said, the resources that some people are preemptively spending could be used towards things like, mental health and making sure that those resources are, kind of beefed up for the students.
Hmm. Absolutely. Especially right now, where we know that all the LGBTQ funding for hotline support, crisis support,
Yeah,
nationally on a national hotline scale has been removed. And we see that there have been such major like cuts and attacks on all the LGBTQIA community. And, I'm not here trying to say whether I agree, disagree with if you're transgender or not. That is your personal choice. I'm not here trying to judge or decide that for anyone. But what I am here, and Lainey, I believe, we're here together, just completely stating the facts of what is going on under Title IX to state for campuses and for schools to be cautious with your decision making because of
absolutely. I couldn't agree anymore.
the fact that things can change. Whether they change or not, we are not saying we agree or disagree with them at this point, but we are saying these things are happening. And this is the reality of our country right now. And with that said, thank you all for joining us today. This was a very short and sweet topic area for us to cover, but a very important one for all administrators and campuses out there really wondering what they should be doing, how they should be thinking about it. And again, Lainey, just thank you so much for joining us today. I'll give you the floor if you want to say a few words.
I just want to thank you. And I think that it's just very important for us to kind of make our audience aware of, what's happening in lifetime and what is, on our doorsteps. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. And again, for everyone out there, if you like us, please follow us, subscribe to us. We are on YouTube, Spotify, and all social media. We look forward to having you continue with us as our second season is fully under swing. And we'll see you at the next one. Thanks again, Lainey. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.